have a couple of questions basically about heaven and eternity. How do you reconcile, one, there being a heaven currently in existence to accept the dead who are saved? Two, Christ coming back again to raise up those who died in his name?
Well, there's more we don't know about the life to come than what we do know. Heaven, that term is used in different ways in Scripture, but you're using in the term of if you're using the term of the presence of God, I think it transcends this universe. But what I think maybe the best way to answer this is, according to Scripture, the best indication is that when we die, we have an immaterial part, soul, spirit, however you define that, and we have a material part, a physical part. So when we die, what happens is our soul/spirit is separated from our body. So our body decays. The essence of death is separation. So when Adam and Eve sinned, they died. They were separated from God. That's a spiritual death. Physical death is not that you cease to exist. Physical death is that your soul is separated from your body, but your soul lives on. So if you take the story of the rich man and Lazarus that Jesus told in Luke 16, what it appears to be is that when people die, their soul is separated from their body, and those who die in faith with the Lord, they are in a place of rest with the Lord, but they're still not resurrected. They're waiting for the resurrection. And those who are unsaved are in a place of torment or unrest, but they too are waiting for the resurrection. So it's a temporary place of waiting, called in the New Testament Hades is the Greek term. The Hebrew term is Sheol. And the King James somewhat confusingly translates it hell, but it translates several different words as hell. But you can see that in Acts chapter 2, when Jesus died, there's a quote from the Psalm 16, "You will not leave my soul in hell. You will not suffer my Holy One to see corruption." You say, what? Jesus went to hell? Well, it's the Greek Hades. So you will not let my soul stay in the place of the dead. You will not let my body decay. You will resurrect me out of the place of the dead. That's what Acts 2 is saying about Jesus. So people who die now are in the intermediate state waiting for the resurrection. So when the Lord comes back in what we call the rapture, those who are alive will be transformed, rise to meet him. Those who are dead will be resurrected into glorified bodies and rise to meet him. So that will be the resurrection. And then we'll go to be wherever Jesus is, which by definition is heaven. Those who are unsaved will be resurrected at the last judgment to be judged, and then they'll be cast into the lake of fire. There's one slight modification in that it seems that after the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, he purchased our salvation. So when we die now as believers, we go into the presence of the Lord. And that's why you see Paul saying to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So we're still waiting, but we're in the presence of the Lord. Now, what that actually looks like and there are a lot of questions. So our loved ones, do they see us? Do they, we don't know a lot of stuff about that. But to answer your question, I believe when we die now in the faith, we go to a place of rest in the presence of the Lord, waiting for the resurrection. And then when we're resurrected, that's when we'll enter the ultimate state, the New Jerusalem, heaven.
So you actually started to ask this next question.
Okay.
It says, are we the same people in heaven? I read that we are changed, that I won't have the same earthly relationships like with my parents or grandparents. Will we recognize those that we love? Will we still be us? Will those relationships matter?
Again, I've never been to heaven, so I don't know a whole lot about it. But there's more we don't know than what we do know. But what we do know, Jesus Christ is the first fruits of the dead. So we're going to be like him. 1 John 3, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. So the best way to know what we're going to be like, Jesus Christ was really human. So he's actually the first human who conquered death. Now, others were resurrected back to their natural body, like Lazarus. But Jesus is the first to receive a glorified body. So think about Jesus after his resurrection. He appeared to his disciples, but he could disappear at will. He could walk through a locked door. He could sit down and eat fish with them. So it appears that he could do whatever he normally would do as a human, but he wasn't limited to that. He had a glorified body. It was immortal, incapable of death, incapable of suffering, incapable of sin. So we'll be the same people, but we will be transformed into sinless perfection. So we will have no sinful nature. We will have no suffering. We will have no death. We'll have no pain, but we still will be recognizably human. 1 Corinthians 13 says, we know in part, but then we'll know perfectly. We see through a glass or a mirror darkly now, but then face to face, and we'll know even as we're known. So I do believe we will know our friends and loved ones that we knew here on earth. But obviously those relationships will be transformed. And how they will be transformed, I don't know. But and then that brings questions. Well, what if your loved one didn't make it? Will you know that? And then won't that make you sad? And you'll be crying in heaven? How is that possible? So here's my best analogy. If you have a dream and you get frightened or scared, and you wake up and you remember that dream, in the dream you're terrified. In the dream, and actually, if someone's monitoring you, your heart would be pounding. And it was a real experience. When you wake up, if you remember the dream, you can remember that you were frightened, that you were terrified. But right at that moment, remembering it, you're not terrified. You're not frightened. If in the dream your loved one died, you were sad. But when you wake up and you remember the dream, you're not sad now. You can remember what it was like, or you can remember that you had that experience, but it can't affect you now because you're fully conscious, awake, alive, and that was a dream. Well, maybe our life in heaven will be so real and so profound and so fulfilling and so wonderful that, yes, I think we'll remember our life on earth and we will remember our relationships, but it will be like a dream compared to the reality. And I think we will have genuine relationships, but it will transcend our human relation. Jesus talked about there's no marriage in heaven, but we'll be like the angels. And, you know, for some people that had a wonderful marriage, they think, oh, that's terrible. But other people that were very faithful to God through maybe a difficult marriage, maybe they might not feel quite the same way. I don't know. I think I'm on the first category rather than the second category, at least from my perspective. My wife is here, so she might be one of the ones who would say, well, if I could be faithful until death. No. So I do believe those wonderful relationships will be continued, but in a way that we can't imagine. But at the same time, we'll have the ability to have relationships with other people in a spiritual way that will be beyond our comparison now, because it will all be through Jesus Christ. So here's what I would say. God doesn't tell us everything we want to know. He doesn't always satisfy our curiosity, but he tells us what we need to know. So it's going to be wonderful. It's going to be amazing. You don't want to miss it. It'll be worth it. So whatever worries you have, like, will my dog be in heaven? I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe if you want him there, he'll be there. But, you know, again, how many years do you want him there? You know, after 1,000 years, you might decide you're finished. You know, I don't know. But I believe that if you have any worries or fears, don't worry about it. God will have it all figured out. So, you know, just get there and we can sort it all out later.